He had worked hard all his life and was proud to finally retire. Retire. But when the 2025 tax update came out, a letter from the Internal Revenue Service changed everything, almost costing him $10,000 in savings. What he discovered next could change the way you plan for retirement forever. The morning light, usually a golden balm that softened the edges of Arthur's corner hardware and painted the old oak shelves with a familiar warmth, felt different that day. Sharper, almost accusatory, as it sliced through the dust motes dancing above my worn out counter. I remember the faint scent of sawdust and aged metal clinging to the air, a scent that had been the backdrop to my life for nearly 50 years, a scent that now felt heavy, weighted with an unspoken dread. My coffee, a brew I'd perfected over decades, strong, black, a little bitter, just like life had taught me to prefer it, sat steaming in my chipped mug, its warmth failing to thaw the sudden chill that had gripped my stomach, a cold dread far more potent than any winter morning. It all started, as these things often do, with something as mundane as an email. A message from my old accountant, Frank, whose subject line practically screamed at me from the antique desktop monitor I kept for purely practical purposes. Urgent. 2025 tax changes. Potential 10,000 plus impact on your retirement. My world, which I thought I had built on solid, dependable ground, suddenly felt like it was shifting beneath my very feet. I'd never been one for screens, not really. My hands understood the language of wrenches and wood, the grit of sandpaper, the satisfying click of a well-oiled hinge, not the cold, glowing pixels that held such ominous pronouncements. But there it was, stark and unforgiving, a digital harbinger of what felt like impending doom, stealing the quiet peace of what should have been just another Tuesday, another day spent mending things, fixing what was broken for the folks who wandered into my little corner of the world. My store, Arthur's Corner, it wasn't just a business. It was a living, breathing extension of me. A place where generations of families had come for everything from a stubborn nail to advice on fixing a leaky faucet, and it had always been enough, more than enough, for me to feel secure, to believe that my diligent work, my endless hours, would naturally translate into a comfortable, well-earned retirement. I'd always thought of the store itself as my retirement plan, a vibrant, continuous testament to a life well spent, its constant hum a lullaby of industry, never quite realizing that the broader world, the world of numbers and policies and legislative jargon, cared little for the honest sweat of a man's brow or the unwavering loyalty of a community. My gaze lingered on those words, potential $10,000 plus impact, and I felt a tightening in my chest, a sensation akin to trying to breathe with a heavy vice clamped around my ribs. $10,000. Hell, that was more than what some folks made in a year, and the thought of it simply vanishing, plucked away by some faceless decree, felt like a personal affront, a cruel cosmic joke after a lifetime of scrimping and saving and putting everything I had into this place. I wiped my hands, calloused and stained with grease and honest toil, on my worn apron, the fabric as familiar as a second skin, and pushed myself away from the counter, needing to move, to ground myself in the tangible reality of the store. My eyes swept across the orderly chaos of the aisles, the gleaming rows of tools, the vibrant cascade of paint chips, the dusty stacks of lumber. Each item a silent witness to a life lived in careful dedication, a life that suddenly seemed to teeter on the precipice of uncertainty. I'd always operated on a simple philosophy: work hard, be honest, provide value, and everything else would fall into place, a kind of unspoken contract with the universe. But this email, this stark warning, suggested that the universe, or at least the part of it managed by accountants and legislators, didn't much care for simple philosophies. I'd seen plenty of changes over the decades, waves of new regulations, the ebb and flow of economic tides, the relentless march of technology that threatened to make my kind of place obsolete, but I'd always navigated them, always found a way to adapt, to keep the lights on and the doors open. This felt different, though, more insidious. A threat that wasn't about competition or changing consumer tastes, but about the very foundation of what I had built, the quiet hope of finally easing off the gas, of spending more time with Sarah, my daughter, and maybe, just maybe, finally getting around to fixing that old fishing boat I'd bought decades ago and never touched. My retirement, That distant, hazy horizon I'd occasionally glimpsed in quiet moments had always felt like a right, a natural conclusion to a life of ceaseless effort, a reward for showing up day in and day out, rain or shine, through recessions and booms. But now it felt like a privilege, one that could be revoked, snatched away by an expiring legislative act and a number I didn't understand. The email had mentioned TCJA provisions expiring 2025, a jumble of letters and numbers that meant nothing to my hands-on brain, yet its implications were crystal clear. More money out of my pocket, less for my future. The very notion of it made the familiar creak of the floorboards under my heavy boots sound like a lament. By lunchtime, the unease hadn't subsided. In fact, it had festered, growing into a dull ache behind my eyes. I'd tried to distract myself, to lose myself in the rhythm of the store, helping Mrs. Henderson find the right kind of plant food for her prize-winning petunias, guiding young Billy Miller on how to reattach the wheel to his skateboard with industrial-strength epoxy, even spending a good hour painstakingly sorting through a fresh shipment of screws and bolts. Each task, usually a source of quiet satisfaction, now felt like a desperate attempt to ignore the elephant stomping around in the back of my mind, an elephant named financial uncertainty. I kept picturing Sarah's face, my bright, capable daughter, who'd gone off to the big city and made a name for herself in finance. A world I barely understood but respected fiercely. She was the one who spoke this language, this convoluted dialect of taxes and investments and expiring provisions. I knew I had to call her, but a stubborn streak born of decades of solitary problem solving made me hesitate. Admitting I was lost, that I needed help, especially from my own daughter, always felt like a small failure, a concession to the relentless march of time and the complexities I hadn't kept up with. The afternoon wore on, a slow, molasses-like crawl, until the clock on the wall above the paint mixer finally ticked past 5, signaling the official end of the workday, though my days rarely truly ended with the clock. I flipped the closed sign, locked the heavy oak door, and stepped out into the crisp October air, the scent of burning leaves from somewhere down the street, a welcome, grounding aroma after a day of internal turmoil. My small apartment nestled above the store had always been a sanctuary, a quiet retreat where I could shed the day's burdens and simply be. But as I sat at my worn kitchen table, the landline receiver heavy in my hand, even its familiar weight couldn't entirely dispel the knot in my stomach. Dialing Sarah's number, I imagined her bustling, high-rise office, her sleek computer screens, a stark contrast to my world of worn wood and honest rust. The phone rang twice, then her voice, bright and professional, answered, "Sarah Jensen, how can I help you?" "Sarah, it's Dad," I grumbled, my voice a little rougher than I intended, a subconscious defense mechanism kicking in. There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause on her end, then her tone softened, shifting from the sharp precision of a finance professional to the gentle warmth of a daughter. "Dad, everything all right? You usually call me on Sundays." The casual question highlighted the unusual nature of my call, amplifying my embarrassment. "No, not exactly all right," I began, my gaze sweeping over the familiar comfort of my kitchen, the slightly peeling paint on the cabinets, the old radio on the counter, the stack of bills by the sugar bowl, suddenly looking far more menacing than usual. I got an email from Frank about some tax changes, something about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expiring in 2025, and he said it could mean I'd lose $10,000 or more a year. Is that even possible? There was a sigh from her end, a sound that spoke of empathy and professional fatigue, a sound that told me she dealt with this kind of panic regularly. "Yes, Dad, it's absolutely possible. It's what a lot of my clients are worried about right now. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, or TCJA as we call it, from 2017, it brought a bunch of changes, mostly good for individuals and small businesses like yours. Lower income tax rates, higher standard deductions, that whole qualified business income deduction thing. But the kicker is, most of those provisions, they're set to expire on December 31st, 2025, unless Congress actually does something to extend them." She spoke with a practiced cadence, the jargon flowing easily from her while I struggled to keep up. And each term a dense fog obscuring the simple truth, my money was on the line. "So what does that mean for me, Sarah?" Does it mean I'm going to pay a whole lot more in taxes on the store, on my income, on everything I've worked my entire life for? I pressed, the frustration seeping into my voice. I could practically picturing my store, my books, calculating the implications in her head. Well, if those provisions just poof, disappear, a lot of people are going to face higher tax rates across the board. The standard deduction, which is a big deal for most folks, could drop pretty significantly, essentially shrinking the amount of income you can shield from taxes. For a small business like yours, that could definitely hit your cash flow, your net profit. I've been doing some preliminary projections for clients in similar situations to yours. And yes, Dad, without any countermeasures, you could easily be looking at an additional $10,000, even $15,000 in taxes each year once those changes kick in. I closed my eyes, the amount $10,000, even $15,000, echoing in my head like a death knell. My throat felt dry, my voice barely a whisper when I finally managed to speak. $15,000. Sarah, that's a huge chunk, a substantial part of what I was counting on for my retirement for a bit of peace and quiet after all these years. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only with the faint crackle of the phone line, and I imagined her on the other end, her brow furrowed with concern, weighing the implications of my belated financial awakening. Dad, she said, her voice softer now, infused with a gentle urgency. Don't you worry. It's not a lost cause, not by a long shot. We just need to be smarter, more proactive. I've been thinking about a few things we can do right now to prepare you for 2025. It's absolutely not too late to start, Dad, I promise. Her words, delivered with such unwavering conviction, were a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in the deepening gloom, and for the first time that day, I felt a flicker of something other than dread, a tiny spark of determination, a willingness to listen, to learn, to fight for the future I had earned. The next morning, the store felt different, not quite as oppressive, now that a plan, however nascent, was forming. The scent of coffee was once again a comfort, not a prelude to anxiety, and as I unlocked the doors, the familiar clang of the bell above my head sounded less like a somber toll and more like a gentle invitation. Sarah, true to her word, had cleared her schedule to drive down from the city that afternoon, a rare luxury for her, and the thought of her presence, her sharp mind focused on my predicament, was a comforting balm. I spent the morning in a strange state of anticipation, answering questions about spackle and plumbing fixtures with an almost automatic ease, my mind buzzing with the possibilities she had hinted at, the vague promise of strategies and countermeasures. When her sleek silver car finally pulled up outside the store, a stark contrast to the faded brick and worn wood of Arthur's Corner, I felt a familiar pang of fatherly pride mingled with that persistent, humbling need for help. Sarah, looking sharp and professional in her city clothes, her bright eyes alight with a mix of affection and determination, stepped out and gave me a warm hug, the scent of her expensive perfume momentarily overpowering the familiar smells of hardware and dust. "Hey, Dad," she said, her smile wide, but I could see the subtle worry etched around her eyes. "Let's tackle this beast, shall we?" We retreated to my small apartment above the store, the same space where she'd grown up, now transformed into a temporary war room, spread with notebooks, a calculator, and her sleek tablet, its screen already glowing with charts and figures that swam before my eyes like hieroglyphs. "First things first, Dad," she began, her voice calm and methodical, pulling me into the unfamiliar world of financial planning. "We need to maximize any tax-advantaged retirement savings you can contribute to. How old are you again, exactly?" I chuckled, a dry, rusty sound. 68, kiddo. Feel 100 sometimes, especially after yesterday's news." She nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Perfect. That means you're eligible for what we call catch-up contributions to your IRA. For 2025, the projected regular contribution limit for an IRA is going to be around $7,500, but because you're over 50, well over, bless your heart, you can contribute an additional catch-up amount. They're projecting that to be around another $7,500. She paused, letting the numbers sink in, giving my old school brain a chance to process. "So, all told, for 2025, you could potentially contribute a grand total of $15,000 to your IRA. She pointed to a neat little chart on her tablet, a visual aid to help me grasp the figures. IRA catch-up contribution 2025 50 plus, base limit $7,500 plus catch-up $7,500 equals total $15,000. My eyes widened. I'd always thought of IRAs as something for the youngs, for folks with regular paychecks and fancy company benefits. My retirement savings, such as they were, had been a patchwork quilt of sporadic deposits into a regular savings account, a few CDs, and the ever-present unwavering belief that the store itself would simply provide. The idea of contributing such a substantial amount and then getting a tax break for it was a revelation. $15,000? I repeated, the sum feeling enormous. Sarah, I don't know if I can even manage that much in a single year, not with everything else. I thought of the steady drip of expenses, the need to keep the store stocked, the occasional unexpected repair, the small comforts I allowed myself. She smiled, a reassuring gesture. It's okay if you can't hit the maximum, Dad. The point is to contribute as much as you possibly can. Every single dollar you put into that IRA doesn't just grow tax deferred, it also reduces your taxable income right now. It's a double whammy of good news. She pushed her tablet slightly closer to me, her finger tracing a line down the screen. And this next one, I think you'll really appreciate, Dad, because you've always been so generous with your time and money in this community. You've already passed the age, haven't you? I frowned, confused. Past what age, kiddo? I'm 68, going on 69 this coming March. She clapped her hands together softly. Perfect timing. You'll be 70 and a half by March of 2025. That means you'll be eligible for something called a Qualified Charitable Distribution, or QCD. She leaned forward, her voice filled with a quiet excitement, like she was unveiling a secret treasure. Do you know that once you hit 70 and a half, you can donate money directly from your IRA to an eligible charity, and you don't have to pay income tax on that withdrawal? My eyebrows shot up. Really? I've always given to the church, to the local library, to the food bank, but I'd always pull the money out first, pay the taxes on it, and then send it off. I pictured the annual receipts, the small tax deductions I'd claim, feeling like I was doing my part. Exactly, Sarah exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. That's the whole point. When you do a QCD, that money counts towards your required minimum distribution, your RMD, when you hit the age where you have to start taking money out of your IRA. But here's the crucial part. It doesn't get counted as part of your adjusted gross income, your AGI. Why is that so important, you ask? She fixed me with an almost theatrical gaze, clearly enjoying the role of financial guru. Because a lower AGI can mean that a smaller portion of your Social Security benefits gets taxed. It was like a switch had flipped in my brain, a light illuminating a previously dark corridor. All those years, I just assumed that my Social Security, the reward for a lifetime of contributions, would be taxed no matter what. So, if I give directly from my IRA, not only am I helping a good cause, but I'm also keeping Uncle Sam's hands out of my Social Security checks? I asked, a hopeful grin spreading across my face. Sarah beamed. Precisely, Dad. Think of it like this. When your AGI goes above a certain threshold, a significant portion, up to 85% of your Social Security benefits becomes taxable. By using a QCD, you're doing good in the world, you're fulfilling your RMD obligation, and you're protecting a bigger slice of your hard-earned Social Security from being siphoned off by taxes. It's a win-win, Dad, a true double victory. The thought brought a genuine sense of relief, a rare confluence of doing good and doing well for myself, a principle I'd always tried to live by, but never quite applied to the labyrinthine world of personal finance. We talked for hours that afternoon, the sun casting long, shifting shadows across the apartment as it slowly dipped towards the horizon. Sarah patiently walked me through the concept of COLA, the cost of living adjustment for Social Security, projected at around 3.2% for 2025, a number that sounded small but held significant implications for my budget. It helps you keep pace with rising costs, Dad, she explained, but it also means that managing your taxable income becomes even more critical to make sure those benefits aren't swallowed up by a higher tax bracket. It was a constant dance, she stressed, between income and outgo, between what you earned and what the government claimed, and the key was to choreograph that dance, not let it simply happen to you. Finally, As the last vestiges of daylight faded and the streetlights outside flickered to life, she turned to the topic of my investments, or rather, my distinct lack thereof beyond a few cautious, low-interest vehicles. Okay, last big one, Dad, she said, her voice softening slightly, sensing my mental exhaustion. We need to reevaluate how you're investing the rest of your money. The money you're not funneling into an IRA or charitable distributions. With those TCJA provisions expiring, every single dollar you have is going to matter even more. I strongly recommend you look at a diversified, low-cost investment portfolio, things like index funds or exchange-traded funds, ETFs. Companies like Vanguard, they've pioneered these incredible options that let you invest in the entire market or large segments of it for super low fees. It gives your money the best chance to grow steadily, without being eroded by unnecessary charges and commissions. I nodded, absorbing the unfamiliar terms, trying to picture my hard-earned savings as tiny ships sailing on a vast financial ocean guided by invisible currents. Vanguard Index Funds, I murmured, testing the words on my tongue, my mind still more attuned to the tangibility of nuts and bolts. She showed me simplified charts on her tablet, illustrating how a diversified portfolio, while not guaranteeing returns, could smooth out the volatility and offer more consistent long-term growth compared to trying to pick individual stocks, a game I'd never had the stomach for. Her words resonated, especially the emphasis on low fees and steady growth, concepts that appealed to my innate pragmatism. As she packed up her things, the apartment felt lighter, the oppressive weight of the morning's news replaced by a fragile but palpable sense of hope. It's a lot, I know, Dad, she said, giving my shoulder a gentle squeeze. But you're a quick study, always have been. And remember, you don't have to do it all at once. Small steps, consistent effort, that's what matters. As she drove away, her taillights disappearing into the twilight, I felt a peculiar mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, like I'd just finished a marathon of the mind, but had, against all odds, crossed the finish line. The beast, as she'd called it, no longer seemed quite so terrifying. It had a name, a shape, and, thanks to Sarah, a set of vulnerabilities I could exploit. The weeks that followed were a blur of numbers and paperwork, a crash course in the arcane language of finance that slowly, painstakingly, began to make sense. My mornings at Arthur's Corner retained their familiar rhythm, the scent of wood and metal, the comfort of routine, but my evenings were transformed. Instead of settling down with a detective novel, I found myself hunched over my old kitchen table, my reading glasses perched on my nose, poring over articles Sarah had sent me, delving into online tutorials, even making cautious calls to Vanguard, talking to calm, patient representatives who spoke in a tongue far more accessible than I'd anticipated. I felt like a carpenter learning quantum physics, fumbling at first, but slowly, meticulously, piecing together the new knowledge. The biggest hurdle, both emotionally and practically, was shifting my mindset, convincing myself that investing wasn't just for the wealthy, or for those daring enough to gamble with their futures, but a necessity, a tool for survival in a world that rewarded proactive planning over sheer brute force. I thought about the decades I'd poured into the store, every nail hammered, every broken window replaced, every customer served with a smile, and how I'd always assumed that the sheer volume of that work would somehow protect me. I remembered my own father, a man who believed in tucking cash under the mattress and scoffing at fancy papers, a belief system that had, in its own way, left him vulnerable in his later years. A lesson I'd subconsciously internalized but never quite applied to my own life. Perhaps it was a stubbornness born of pride, a deep-seated conviction that my hands-on approach to life was the only approach, dismissing the unseen forces of economics as abstract and irrelevant to my tangible world. I saw the faces of my customers, the retirees who struggled with rising costs, the young families grappling with inflation, and a wave of profound empathy washed over me. I wasn't just doing this for myself anymore. I was doing it for every person who had ever walked into my store, for the unspoken promise that a lifetime of honest work should lead to a dignified rest, not a relentless struggle. This wasn't just about my retirement, it was about reclaiming a sense of agency, proving that even an old dog could learn new tricks, especially when the stakes were so incredibly high. I started small, just like Sarah advised, setting up automatic transfers from my business account to a new IRA, an amount I calculated I could manage without straining the store's cash flow. Each month, seeing that contribution go out felt like a tiny victory, a tangible step towards securing my future, a quiet rebellion against the fear that had gripped me. It wasn't the full $15,000 Sarah had outlined, not yet, but it was a start, a commitment. And with each successful transfer, a little more of that old dread dissipated, replaced by a nascent sense of control. Then came the QCDs, the Qualified Charitable Distributions, a concept that truly warmed my heart, marrying my practical need for tax efficiency with my lifelong desire to give back. I'd always been a quiet contributor to our small community, the local library, the church, the animal shelter down the road. But now, armed with Sarah's knowledge, I saw how I could amplify my impact, making my generosity work smarter, not just harder. I remembered Mrs. Gable, a sweet old widow who frequented my store, always buying birdseed and small, colorful trinkets for her grandchildren. She'd lost her husband years ago, and her stories often hinted at a meager pension and the constant struggle to make ends meet, a poignant reminder of the fragility of financial security in old age. The thought of helping organizations that supported people like Mrs. Gable, while simultaneously safeguarding my own modest social security, resonated deeply with my sense of fairness, a quiet dignity in giving that felt profoundly right. I called the church first, then the library, talking to the treasurers, explaining this new approach, feeling a quiet satisfaction as they too learned about this powerful yet often overlooked strategy. The shift to low-cost index funds was perhaps the most intellectually challenging, a leap of faith from the familiar comfort of a savings account to the abstract world of market movements. Sarah walked me through it, drawing analogies to the hardware store, explaining how diversification was like stocking a wide variety of tools, ensuring that if one hammer didn't sell, another screwdriver would. You're buying a tiny piece of hundreds, even thousands of companies, Dad, she explained over another video call, her voice patient and encouraging. So, if one company falters, the others are still carrying the load. It's about spreading your bets, not putting all your eggs in one volatile basket. The logic, once stripped of its jargon, was simple, elegant even, mirroring the practical common sense I'd applied to the hardware business for decades. I chose a broad market index fund, one that tracked the S&P 500, and a smaller bond fund, a conservative blend that felt right for my age and risk tolerance. It was a slow, deliberate process, each step fraught with the anxiety of the unknown. But each step also brought a strange sense of liberation, a shedding of old, limiting beliefs. My journey wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the stories, the people woven into the fabric of my life. I remember Mr. Henderson, a gruff but kind old farmer who had bought his first tractor from my father decades ago, coming into the store one blustery afternoon. He was looking for a specific part for his ancient well pump, a part I knew I hadn't stocked in years. "Arthur," he grumbled, his voice raspy from a lifetime of shouting over machinery, "my well's gone kaput. If I can't get this pump fixed, I'll be hauling water from the creek, just like my grandpappy did." The concern in his eyes was stark, a glimpse into the everyday struggles of folks in our rural community, where a broken well could mean a ruined season. I spent the better part of an hour with him, digging through old catalogs, calling suppliers, eventually finding the obscure part, and having it rushed in. As he thanked me, a rare smile creasing his weathered face, I realized that my own struggles with financial security, while abstract, were intimately connected to the tangible realities of my customers' lives. If Arthur's Corner went under, if I couldn't afford to keep it running, who would help Mr. Henderson with his well pump? Who would lend a sympathetic ear to Mrs. Gable? The store wasn't just a business, it was a cornerstone of the community, a small but vital anchor in a sea of change. This deepened my resolve, making my financial planning feel less like a selfish endeavor and more like a sacred duty. One blustery December morning, a young couple, Maria and David, came into the store, their faces etched with a familiar desperation. They were trying to fix up an old farmhouse they'd bought, a fixer-upper project that was clearly stretching their meager budget. They needed a specific type of plumbing fixture, one I had in stock, but when Maria pulled out her wallet, her face flushed with embarrassment. She whispered, "Arthur, we're a little short this week. David's hours got cut at the mill. Could we pay you next week?" In the past, I might have hesitated, or perhaps offered a small discount, but now, with Sarah's words echoing in my mind about community and resilience, I found myself doing something different. "Maria," I said, a gentle smile on my face, "don't you worry about it. Take the fixture. You pay me when you can. What's more important is keeping the water flowing in your home." The gratitude in their eyes, the sheer relief, was a powerful affirmation, a reminder that true wealth wasn't just about dollars and cents, but about connection, about supporting each other through life's inevitable storms. This new financial clarity, this sense of control, surprisingly freed me to be even more generous, more rooted in the community I served. It wasn't about hoarding wealth, it was about cultivating it, both in my bank account and in the hearts of my neighbors. As winter slowly yielded to the tentative embrace of spring, then to the full bloom of summer, I felt a transformation unfolding within me. The initial fear had given way to a quiet confidence, the overwhelming complexity to a gradual understanding. Sarah continued to be my guide, checking in regularly, celebrating my small victories, gently correcting my occasional missteps. We even had a slightly more philosophical conversation one evening, reflecting on this journey. "It's funny, Dad," she had mused, her voice thoughtful. "Most people think financial planning is about predicting the future, but it's really about preparing for the unpredictable. It's about building resilience, so when the unexpected inevitably happens, you're not shattered." Her words struck a chord, reminding me of the countless times I'd had to adapt at the store, fixing a problem I'd never encountered before, making do with limited resources, always finding a way. It was the same principle, just applied to a different kind of toolkit. One sweltering August afternoon, as the cicadas hummed their lazy song outside and the air in the store hung heavy with the scent of pine cleaner, I found myself sitting at my counter, not dreading an email, but reviewing my IRA statement, a new habit I'd adopted with surprising diligence. The numbers weren't astronomical, but they were growing, steadily, predictably, a testament to consistency and the power of compound interest. I saw the contributions I'd made, the small but meaningful donations I'd funneled through QCDs, the diversified investments slowly accumulating value. My mind, once cluttered with worry, now felt organized, purposeful, like a well-stocked toolbox. The thought of 2025, once a looming specter, now felt like a manageable challenge, a game of chess I was finally learning to play. I wasn't immune to the anxieties of the world, the whispers of inflation, the unpredictable political winds, but I was armed with knowledge, with a plan, with the quiet conviction that I had done everything within my power to protect my future. My retirement, which had once felt like a precarious cliff edge, now looked more like a gently sloping hill, still a climb, but one I felt ready for. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the peace of mind, the deep, abiding satisfaction of taking control, of asserting my dignity in the face of an uncertain world. I remembered the early days of the store, the endless hours, the sheer physical exertion, the pride of building something with my own hands. I remembered the late nights, hunched over ledgers, trying to stretch every dollar. I remembered Sarah's mother, bless her soul, encouraging me, reminding me that hard work was its own reward. And it truly was. But now I understood that hard work alone wasn't enough. It needed to be coupled with smart work, with strategic thinking, with an openness to learn from those who understood the unseen currents of the modern world. My hands, still capable of intricate repairs and heavy lifting, were now also capable of navigating the digital landscape of online banking and investment platforms. A surprising evolution for a man who once scoffed at anything more complicated than a rotary phone. The sun was setting as I locked up Arthur's Corner that evening, the golden light bathing the old sign, Arthur's Corner, in a soft, ethereal glow. I paused, taking a deep breath, the familiar scent of sawdust and aged metal now carrying a hint of new beginnings, a subtle aroma of optimism. The weight on my shoulders, the invisible burden of financial dread, had lifted, replaced by a profound sense of lightness. I knew I wasn't a millionaire, and I wasn't about to start wearing tailored suits or flying first class, but I had something far more valuable: security, a quiet dignity, and the profound peace that comes from knowing you've done right by yourself, by your family, and by the future you've worked so hard to build. I smiled. A genuine, heartfelt smile, the kind that reaches your eyes and crinkles the corners. I had thought I was too old to change, too set in my ways to learn new tricks. But Sarah was right. It was never too late. Not for me, not for anyone. My happy retirement wouldn't just be about comfort. It would be about continuation, about connection, about knowing I had faced the storm and, with a little help and a lot of learning, had successfully charted a new, more secure course. And that, my friends, is the story of Arthur. A story about a man who, like many of us, found himself staring down a future that looked bleak, a future threatened by changes he didn't understand. But it's also a story about resilience, about the incredible power of learning, and about the unwavering truth that it's never too late to take control of your destiny, especially when it comes to your financial well-being. If Arthur's journey, his struggle and eventual triumph over financial uncertainty resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of hope or a realization that you too can take charge, then please hit that like button right now. This isn't just a story about numbers, it's about the human spirit, about dignity, and about securing the peace of mind you deserve in your golden years. Arthur learned that knowledge isn't just power, it's peace. It's the quiet confidence that comes from understanding the rules of the game, even when those rules are changing. His story is a powerful reminder that preparing for the future isn't about magical solutions, but about practical steps and an open mind. If this message resonated with you, if you know someone else who's worrying about retirement or feeling overwhelmed by financial jargon, please share this video with them. You might just be the catalyst for their own journey to financial empowerment. I want to hear your stories. Arthur's initial fear was profound, a fear of losing what he'd worked for. What's the biggest financial worry keeping you up at night? What's one small step you're committed to taking this week to secure your future? Drop a comment below and let us know. Let's build a community of proactive planners, sharing our wisdom and encouraging each other. Your experience could be the exact inspiration someone else needs. Remember, the world of finance can feel intimidating, but with guidance, patience, and a willingness to learn, you can navigate it successfully. Arthur started with nothing but an email and a phone call to his daughter, and he built a new path. Don't let fear paralyze you. Let it motivate you to action. Every small step, every question asked, every piece of information absorbed adds up to a stronger, more secure future. So, don't wait another day, another week, another month. Take that first step, just like Arthur did. And while you're at it, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on more inspiring stories, practical advice, and actionable strategies to help you live your best, most secure life. We're on this journey together, and I can't wait to see your own success stories unfold. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.